Hello and welcome to Fantastic Fights, the podcast about a middle-aged man playing adventure game books out loud on the internet. That middle-aged man is me, Hieronymus J. Doom, and this episode we're taking a look at Port of Peril by Ian Livingstone with art by Vlados Krizan, cover art by Robert Ball, and a lovely map of Allansia by Leo Hartas. This book was kindly provided to me by Jim Druitt. Thank you very much for that. Such largesse is always appreciated. Before we get into the meat of the episode, there's a couple of notices. Firstly, I need to thank a new patron. Fergal Gallagher, thank you so much for putting your hand in your pocket to support my nonsense. It is deeply, deeply appreciated. All patrons get a bevy of silly gaming materials, and I'm already kicking around some ideas for my next game book, so hopefully there'll be even more before too long. Patreon.com/HJDoom is the place to go if you want to lend a hand. Also, don't forget the Lindebaum Prize for writing a 100-section gamebook is ongoing. There's more details at the beginning of the last episode and a link in the show notes for this episode. It's a great opportunity to win actual hard cash for doing something cool and fun, and if you're thinking about giving it a go, it's worth starting now because time has a way of slipping through your fingers. Port of Peril sees Ian Livingstone return for a grand tour around Allansia after his more experimental but still quite interesting Blood of the Zombies book. This seems like pure nostalgia bait, but given that it was released in 2017, I don't really see that as an actual issue. It's been a very long time since such classics as The Forest of Doom and City of Thieves, and with other writers mostly confining themselves to the continents of cool and the old world, it's lovely to be heading back to the original setting of Allansia, a continent replete with fascinating and evocative locations. The cover art of the Port of Peril shows a big grey orcish looking character with black armour and a big axe. It's a bit cartoony for my tastes. If this was on the cover of a comic book, I would be very happy with it, but I do like my fighting fantasy art to be a bit more old school, preferably in oil paints or acrylics rather than digital art, which I think this is. The picture does take up most of the cover though, which is a nice change from the rather busy designs we've seen more recently, where the actual art is reduced to something of an afterthought. Let's take a look at the rules. You can't get more old school fighting fantasy than the rules presented in Port of Peril. Not only are skill, stamina and luck all present and correct, we've got 10 provisions and our choice of 3 potions to restore either skill, stamina or luck. That is full-on Warlock of Firetop Mountain rules, and I'm very happy to see a nostalgia-based book stick so rigidly to the core premise. There's no mention made of fighting more than one creature, which means no opportunity to create a slightly different set of rules to try and catch me out, which is a shame, but probably a sensible decision. I have rolled up a character who I've decided to call Shankly Beard Dobbler, because that sounds like a suitably heroic name to me. They have a skill of 12, which is probably going to be very handy in an Ian Livingstone book, a stamina of 18, and a luck of 11. This is my strongest character in ages. I have chosen the Potion of Luck, strapped on my sword and shield, donned my leather armour, and checked there's enough hobnobs in my rucksack. It is time to play Port of Peril. Background. Chalice is an affluent town on the north bank of Silver River, a wide, twisting river, which flows gently from the Moonstone Hills to merge with Catfish River on its way to the Western Ocean. It began as nothing more than a merchant's store built at the end of a wooden jetty used by river traders to land their goods. At first, trade was very slow, and the merchant complained he'd been handed a poisoned chalice. Trade slowly improved, but the name stuck, and over time Chalice grew to become a busy river port. Nice to get a backstory on the name of Chalice, that's fun. Chalice's inhabitants are mostly human, and it is also home to a number of other races. There are elves, who always seem to know more about what's going on than anybody else. Striders, who run around town on their spindly long legs doing errands. Manorcs, usually hired as guards. Gnomes, who spend most of their time slurping down bowls of pea soup. 2 beefy ogres, who hire themselves out to do most of the heavy lifting jobs. And an unusually friendly Cyclops, who arrived one day long ago with goods to trade and never left. He acquired the nickname of Psy, became a blacksmith and quickly built a reputation as the best smithy in Chalice. He later turned his skills to crafting the finest swords in northern Allansia, but never made more than one a month as he refused to compromise on quality. Sai proudly sells his famous one-eye swords for 50 gold pieces each. A quality price for a quality product, as he says with gusto to his customers, and he is never short of these. I feel as though this opening is skewing a little bit towards the younger end of the spectrum than perhaps some of the later period fighting fantasy books. I think that's a good thing. I think first book by Ian Livingstone in a long time is potentially a chance to get some younger players interested in the strange and absorbing world of fighting fantasy. Commerce is the main reason for Chalice's prosperity. Merchants arrive from all over Allansia to sell their wares in the town, where prices are always at a premium. Vendors pack the market square 6 days a week, selling weapons, armour, potions, lotions, herbs, spices, grains, livestock, semi-precious stones, jewellery, silk, furs, fine textiles and exotic foodstuffs. Money changes hands from dawn till dusk in brisk trading. Although Chalice has its fair share of impoverished folk, it affords noble merchants, landlords and innkeepers a fine living. Unlike any large town with wealthy inhabitants, Chalice also attracts pickpockets and thieves, who see the opportunity to relieve some of the more naive townsfolk of their hard-earned gold and silver. Young con artists learn their devious skills in Chalice, spinning yarns and practising their scams on the locals. If they don't get caught, the best of them journey downriver to try their luck on the citizens of Port Blacksand, where they must compete with hardened professional thieves and vagabonds. Does paint a vivid picture, Ian Livingstone, possibly his finest quality as a gamebook writer. You are a seasoned adventurer, an experienced sword for hire who enjoys slaying monsters and finding treasure above anything else. Despite some memorable adventures, you have learned the hard way that treasure hunting does not always guarantee the reward of glittering gold. More often than not, treasure hunters come back from their expeditions empty-handed. And when things don't go well, adventurers reluctantly have to resort to working for others, usually earning a low wage guarding rich nobles' estates or protecting merchants' caravans on their journey to market. You recently arrived in Chalice tired and hungry, after spending a month scouring the pagan plains trying, but failing, to find the buried treasure hoard of Throm, the notorious axe-wielding barbarian who, rumour has it, died in Baron Succumvit's infamous death-trap dungeon in Fang, trying to win the grand prize of 10,000 gold pieces. Lordy, but the references are coming thick and fast, and I'm very much enjoying it. Your days spent in Chalice have been anything but enjoyable. Unable to find work, you are forced to sleep rough in alleyways, scavenging for scraps of food left abandoned by traders in the market square at the end of the day. It is a warm evening on day 4 of your stay. The sun is slowly sinking in the western sky and the light is beginning to fade. You are standing outside the Fat Frog Inn drooling over the menu nailed to the oak door when 2 men stagger outside arm in arm. One is middle-aged and bearded and wearing a brown leather tunic over dark green leggings, while the younger one is wearing a checked woolen shirt tucked into his baggy brown pants. Both men are giggling like children, very much the worse for the amount of ale they have drunk. They brush past you, oblivious to everything. The younger man is hiccuping and swaying erratically from side to side. He tries to grab hold of the back of a wooden bench to steady himself, but misses it and falls over, cursing. This causes his friend to laugh even louder. The younger man sits up, squinting in the bright light, his mouth hanging open like a gormless fool. There is a picture of the 2 men who are staggering outside arm in arm. I don't care for it. I will be completely and totally honest. I'm not saying that the art isn't good. It is just very much an illustration from a kid's book in 2017. Very cartoonish, very exaggerated. The shading is very much block shading. They look as though they could have come from an animated series, quite honestly. And the background is only really sketched with the simplest shapes. Yeah, not a fan. I have to say, not a fan. The younger man splutters, hiccuping. What? Stop laughing at me. Why? Because I'm going to be rich. Shut up, the older man replies dismissively. I am. I'm going to be rich. I bought a treasure map, he retorts, reaching into his pocket to produce an old piece of parchment as evidence. Too drunk to notice that he's holding it upside down, he stares at it with a befuddled expression on his face. Although you're well within earshot, you pretend not to be listening. How much did you pay for it? 4 copper pieces. 4 copper pieces? What a fool you are. There's not a hope it's genuine. You've been done, Gregor, the older man says, laughing even louder. Stitched you up like a kipper. The fool chasing fool's gold. That's what you are. You just don't learn, do you? You can't believe anything anyone tells you in the Fat Frog Inn. But that old man seemed so genuine. He had an honest face, not like all those other sharks and villains in there giving it large. I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. Are you going to get your money back? Nah, the poor man needed the money. He sounded desperate. I felt sorry for him. That's why I bought the map, really. No hard feelings. I enjoyed listening to his tale about iron chests filled with golden amulets. He said it was hidden deep in a cave in the Moonstone Hills. He kept going on about a gold ring in the chest. Said it was more valuable than all the amulets put together. What did he call it again? The ring of old fiddle. I can't remember it now. It doesn't matter, does it? If it's not true. Or you say it isn't true. Or whatever. Forget about it, Gregor. He made it all up. A ring of burning snakes, that's what he called it. He said it used to belong to an old wizard called Nico or Nico something or other. He said the wizard would pay a pretty penny to get it back. I said forget about it, Gregor. Come on, get up. Let's try the sun in next. I'm thirsty. Urk says sternly, pulling his friend off the ground. All right, I won't be needing this then, Gregor says, crumpling up the parchment into a ball and tossing it over his shoulder before staggering off. The parchment ball lands just by your feet. Intrigued, you bend down to pick it up. You unfold it to reveal a very detailed hand-drawn map of the land surrounding Chalice. The map shows a dotted line heading north from Chalice, then east, then some way south of Darkwood Forest, crossing the eastern plain to Moonstone Hills, where a large X marks the entrance to a cave in Skull Crag, one of the highest peaks in the range. There is a message in tiny handwriting written in black ink on the back of the map which says, "Do not enter by the cave entrance. Climb the crag to a ledge 20 metres above. Move the standing branches aside to reveal the secret entrance. Enter here and turn left, right at the junctions. An iron chest will be found in the crystal cave. Good luck, Mergat Shur." Could a treasure chest really lie hidden in a cave inside Skull Crag? Why would an old man sell his secrets for a few copper pieces? And who is Mergat Shur? Nothing makes sense. You are about to toss the map away when you hear the shrill squawk of a bird overhead. You look up to see a crow flying north. Could it be an omen? Could this be your lucky day after all? You decide you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. You fold up the parchment and put it safely away in your pocket. Tomorrow you will set off for Skull Crag, but right now you need to find some food and somewhere to sleep before nightfall. So, relatively lengthy introduction, but yeah, fairly good. Very, very simple premise. We're looking for treasure. That, again, feels to me like a nod back to Warlock of Firetop Mountain, and I don't object to that at all. Nice to have an adventure where an undead menace isn't rearing its ugly head, or a demon isn't apparently just about to materialise on the material plane and doom all of Titan to death and destruction. You know me, I'm a fan of the old lower stakes adventure. So let's get on with the first section proper. You fail to find any food and resign yourself to sleeping on some old flour sacks left outside a baker's shop at the end of an alley. You place your blanket on top of the sacks and lie down as darkness falls, ending the day exhausted and very hungry. You hear a dog sniffing nearby, but eventually fall asleep dreaming of treasure chests overflowing with gold pieces and diamonds. So the rules tell me that I have 10 provisions. Yeah, you start the game with enough provisions for 10 meals. So I don't know why I'm hungry unless I'm some kind of picky eater and all of the meals I've got contain sort of broccoli and peas and other vegetables that fussy eaters tend to turn their nose up at. Yeah, bit of a weird one. Not sure. Maybe we will end up picking up some provisions as this opening progresses. Reality returns early the following morning when you are rudely awoken not long after sunrise by the sound of cockerels crowing loudly. The air is chill, but the skies are clear. At least another fine day is in store. You grab your trusty sword, roll up your blanket, and check the few belongings you have in your backpack. They don't amount to much. A ball of twine, a candle, a small brass bell, an oil lantern, a knife, a piece of chalk, a brass owl, a length of rope, a bag of copper nails, an animal skin water flask, and a goblet bearing a unicorn head motif. So that is a lot of stuff. I mean, Ian Livingstone loves an item. He's a big fan of the old items, but this is going a bit far. So I guess I'm going to write down this laundry list of items that I've just been given at the start on my character sheet. I have written everything down on my character sheet. That is 12 different items that I have apparently got even before we inevitably, I assume, go shopping. You make your way to the town square and fill your flask with water which flows from the spout of the fountain carved in the shape of a dragon's head. After quenching your thirst, you search through a pile of rubbish and find some squashed tomatoes and a chunk of bread left to rot in a wooden crate. The bread is stale, but right now a tomato sandwich seems like the breakfast of champions. Add 1 stamina point. Well, my stamina is presumably at maximum. Like, literally, it can only be at maximum. So, adding 1 stamina point does nothing. That is insane. The sandwich takes the edge off your hunger, but you know you could eat more. There is nobody about except a tall, middle-aged man with curly brown hair who is whistling happily to himself as he sweeps the square with his long broom. A leather shoulder bag is slung over his back. Do you want to talk to him, or would you rather leave the market square? I will talk to him. I mean, a middle-aged man is no old man, but beggars can't be choosers. You call out to the street sweeper, but he ignores you and carries on whistling to himself while he works. Do you want to ask him if he has any food to trade for an item in your backpack, or would you rather leave the market square? Literally don't need food. I've got 10 provisions. Nice to see a late fighting fantasy book carrying on the fine tradition of not really proofreading worth a damn. Yeah, I don't think I need to trade items for food on this auspicious day. This is just going to delay me setting off on my adventure, so we're going to leave straight away. There are 3 streets by which you could leave Market Square: Silver Street, Armoury Lane, or Beggar's Alley. I'll go middle for diddle and go Armoury Lane. Armoury Lane is only 100 metres long, but every building in it has been turned into an armourer's shop. All the shop windows are protected by thick iron grills to stop anyone breaking in and helping themselves to all the weapons and armour on display. There are swords, cleavers, spears, picks, pikes, axes and poleaxes, clubs, maces, warhammers, helmets, body armour and shields of every shape and size on display. Great way to hit a word count, a list, I will say that much. There was a ludicrously incompetent writer of pulp science fiction in the, I want to say 50s in the UK. I think his name might have been Fante, and his work, I recall, was replete with lists of synonyms for various actions that the characters took simply in order to artificially inflate the word count. All the shops are closed bar one, which has a door almost twice the height of the other doors in the street. There is an open sign on the iron battered oak door. A small sign in the window reads, "We have your size, at size." You peek through the window but do not see anyone inside. Do you want to go into the shop? Yeah, let's go and meet the Cyclops, I guess. Shelves behind the shop counter are filled with gauntlets, helmets, axes, daggers and arrows, and the walls are covered with shields. Plate and chainmail suits of armour stand against the right-hand wall. There is a glass case standing on the left side of the counter in which a magnificent sword is displayed, probably the finest you have seen in your life. The wide doorway behind the counter has a chainmail curtain which is suddenly pushed aside by a hairy hand the size of a large ham. An enormous, one-eyed creature steps through the curtains to stand behind the counter, leaning on it with its massive hands. "Can I help you?" the Cyclops says, with a smile revealing a row of sharp spiked teeth. You point at the display case and ask if the sword is for sale. "I'm sorry, this one-eye is sold and awaiting collection. I could put you down for a new one if you would like to leave a deposit of 25 gold pieces. It should be ready in about 3 years. If that's too long for you to wait, might I suggest you buy one of my demon daggers for 10 gold pieces?" I don't have any money, so I can't buy a demon dagger, so I guess the other options are attack the Cyclops to get the sword. I mean, I've got a very high skill. Do I really want to start my adventure with murder? I'm second-guessing the book a little bit, but given that this does feel pitched at a slightly younger audience, I'd be a little bit surprised if Ian Livingstone was going to let you just straight up murder a Cyclops in order to get a sword early doors. Having said that now, I'm really, really curious. I'm going to have to find out, so I will attack the Cyclops to get the sword. As you reach for your sword, the Cyclops lets out a deafening roar and reaches over the counter to grab you by the throat with its huge hand. You try to pull his hand away, but the enraged creature's overpowering strength is far greater than yours. You pass out and never wake up. Your adventure is over. I mean, the good news is that I was right, that Ian Livingstone wasn't going to let us get away with robbing a Cyclops of his prize sword. That is very much the silver lining here. Obviously, the bad news is that I've died pretty early on in the adventure. As is tradition, I kind of felt like that was just going to be a really, really tough fight. But yeah, seems fair enough. That sort of thing is such an obvious trap that I don't feel too bad about it. And if you are going to do instant deaths like that, actually earlier in the book is in some ways the best place to do it, because the barrier to restarting is really low. So yeah, no problem with the Cyclops just throttling me, really. What else was it going to do? That torpedoes my chances of beating this on a first playthrough, but we will invoke the sausagey finger bookmark rule and continue playing, and we'll just head off and walk to the end of Armory Lane. I feel as though I've missed a place to get some money, but hey-ho. There is a timber yard at the end of Armory Lane where you see a stocky ogre in a grubby shirt and brown cropped pants loading oak beams onto the shelves, while a man in a black jacket counts the number of beams on each shelf. The yard is formed by tall buildings backing onto one another on 3 sides, and the only way in and out is via Armory Lane. The man turns to you and says, "What can I do for you?" Do you want to talk to him, or would you rather go back to the market square and walk down Beggar's Alley? Talking to people has not really worked desperately well for us so far. It's literally got us strangled, so I think I'm just going to go back and walk down Beggar's Alley. I feel as though, having already died, the only thing I can do here really is try and get to some quality adventuring as quickly as possible. Much as I enjoy sort of prattling about in Chalice, I'm sort of anxious to try and get out and get a sort of sense of the shape of this adventure, because so far I've got no real idea. Beggar's Alley is a narrow, pothole dirt track, hardly wide enough to drive a horse and cart down. Dark and decrepit stone and wood houses line the alley, all of them long in need of repair. There is rubbish everywhere, and the putrid stench of open sewers fills the air. Beggars in ragged clothing stand hunched in doorways, their arms outstretched like lost souls, pleading, hoping that you might gift them a coin or two. Do you have any copper pieces you wish to give to the beggars? I do not, so it's going to have to be down the T-junction to the end of the alley. Towards the end of the dark alley there is a wooden barrel standing in front of the heavy oak front door of a gloomy-looking house built of dark stone with black, shuttered windows bolted shut. Do you want to look inside the barrel, knock on the oak door, or walk onto the T-junction ahead? I mean, the barrel is the kind of place Ian Livingstone loves to hide, I don't know, poisonous frogs, or angry badgers, or dwarves with knives. The barrel seems like an absolute death trap to me, so I'm going to not do that. Am I going to knock on the oak door? I mean, why would I do that? I don't feel as though I've got any kind of reason to be banging on people's doors, so I'm just going to walk on to the T-junction ahead. Lion Street is cobbled and much wider and brighter than Beggar's Alley. It certainly looks to be in a more affluent part of the town. On the opposite side, a high wall runs the length of the street. There are stone gargoyles fixed to the top of the wall every 10 metres or so, staring down threateningly at all who might pass by. Above the wall you can just see the top floor and roof of a large mansion house. Whoever lives there obviously wants privacy and does not welcome visitors. On the near side of the street there are a few shops to your right and houses to your left. Do you want to try and climb over the wall of the mansion house, look in the houses, or take a look in the shop windows? Again, none of these things seem to me particularly appealing. I've got a quest, a very simple quest. I don't really understand why I'm just bimbling aimlessly round Chalice. Yeah, let's look in the shop windows, pointlessly as I don't have any money. There are 5 shops in the street: a florist, a locksmith's, a bookshop, a candle shop, and a wool shop. There is a closed sign on the door of the bookshop, and the only other shop that interests you is the locksmith's. You walk inside and are greeted by a tall, fair-haired man wearing a dark green apron over his striped shirt. He smiles warmly and asks how he can help. You reply that you are about to go on a mission to find a treasure chest hidden in a cave, explaining that you might need a special key to open it. Well, I can't sell you a key to open the chest I've never seen, so I suggest you make a bulk purchase in the hope that one of them might do the job. I sell bunches of 20 all-sorted brass keys for 1 gold piece. You might need more than 1 key, you never know. I've got 1 bunch of keys left. Do you want to buy it? Pay the locksmith 1 gold piece if you decide to buy 20 brass keys. You chat for a few more minutes before leaving the locksmith. I don't have any money, so I can't buy any brass keys. I can try and climb over the walls of the mansion house. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go to the main gate and leave Chalice. I've been recording nearly half an hour, and basically so far nothing has happened. You walk out of the main gate of Chalice, heading north, looking back briefly at the town's rooftops and towers sticking out above the outer wall. You follow a well-worn path past a church ruin and an ancient graveyard, and on past scattered dwellings until you reach a farm where the path ends at the edge of a vast field of golden corn, the tall stems swaying slowly from side to side in the gentle breeze. It's going to be a bumper crop, and good news for the farmers whose oxen will soon be hauling wooden carts through the fields for their farmhands to load with cobs of corn. Looking north as far as you can see, way beyond the cornfield, you can just make out the top of a high wall of trees that marks the edge of Darkwood Forest, the vast forest that is home to the grand and sometimes grumpy old wizard Yaz Tromo, who lives alone in his fabled tower. Many a tale and myth have come from Darkwood Forest, but you remind yourself that Skull Crag is your destination today. You look at your map and head east in the warm sunlight, eager to reach the Moonstone Hills before nightfall. As you walk along the edge of the cornfield lost in thought, you suddenly hear the sound of galloping hooves and the shrill call of a hunting horn. Do you want to face the rider or hide in the cornfield? I don't want to talk to some posho on a horse. I'm going to hide in the cornfield. You dive into the cornfield and wait to see who is approaching. The thundering sound of galloping hooves grows louder, and moments later you catch a glimpse of a horse's leg flashing by, heading west at full speed. Whoever it is on horseback is certainly in a hurry. You decide you might as well help yourself to some corn. Add 1 stamina point. When you have finished eating, you set off again. My stamina is already maximum. You estimate that it will be dark by the time you reach Skull Crag and hope you will be able to find somewhere safe to camp down for the night. Looking south, you see an old stone cottage with just the burnt edges of its thatched roof remaining due to fire. Do you want to look inside the cottage or press on towards the Moonstone Hills? Let's press on towards the Moonstone Hills. Walking through the tall grasses of the eastern plain, you see the great expanse of the Moonstone Hills looming before you, with the foothills no more than half a day's walk away. To your left, the plain stretches north as far as you can see, all the way to Darkwood Forest, and to the south, all the way to Silver River, and beyond. You walk on determinedly, but looking at your map you have a lingering doubt about its authenticity. Half an hour later, you see a flock of birds high in the sky circling above a building about half a kilometre northeastwards. Do you want to investigate, or would you rather keep heading east? Half a kilometre, 500 metres, that is no distance. Let's peel off and have a look at that while we travel. The building is a small wood cabin in front of which there are many rows of blueberry bushes blooming with plump, ripe fruit. There is a scarecrow wearing a straw hat tied to a wooden post in the middle of the rows of bushes, which seems to be keeping the birds at bay. Would you like to take a closer look, or would you rather continue your journey east? Let's take a closer look. Maybe it's a magic scarecrow. Maybe it'll start singing at me and telling me about wizards at the end of roads and that. As you approach the scarecrow, its head suddenly lifts and you see it's not a man made of straw, but a live human being. A sinewy old man with a long beard and straggly hair wearing ragged clothes. "Help, help!" he shouts desperately on seeing you. At that moment, the cabin door flies open and 3 blue-skinned goblin-like creatures run out, screaming at the top of their lungs. They are no more than a metre tall and are wearing red cotton jackets, red pointed hats and red canvas shoes. They have large heads with long pointed noses, and their wide mouths house sharp, jagged teeth and bright red tongues. Their sunken, lizard-like green eyes glaring out from under their pointed hats give them a deranged look, made all the worse by the sight of the big forks and long knives they are holding. They cackle maniacally as they run forward to stab you in the leg. So, that's pretty cool. There is a picture of the blue imps. Credit where credit's due, this is actually quite fun. I feel as though little goblin-y creatures with big wide mouths is a good fit with the artist's style, a much better fit than ordinary human beings. And there is something quite charming and engaging about the sight of like a little monstrous goblin thing with big grin and a knife and fork charging towards you. Again, the background is very, very faintly sketched with just really the dim shape of a scarecrow in the background in silhouette. I would have preferred, as always, something a bit more old-fashioned, but this is a really nice characterful illustration on its own merits. Do we want to fight the blue imps? I think we do. We've not fought anything yet. And I do want to help the old man. Because it's an old man. We've got to find an old man in a fighting fantasy book. It's the law. So, the blue imps may be small in height, but they are very quick and dexterous. Fight them one at a time. First blue imp has a skill of 6, a stamina 5. Second skill 6, stamina 4. And the third skill 6, stamina 5. This should be the work of a moment. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the blue imps and I took no damage. The old man lets out a huge cheer as you dispatch the last of the blue imps. "Wonderful, wonderful," he shouts out happily at the top of his voice. "I'm saved, I'm saved." You untie the ropes binding him to the post and he starts jumping in the air with excitement. You ask him how he ended up becoming a human scarecrow. "Those damned imps," he says angrily. "I was on my way to Deedle Water a week ago and had camped down for the night. I was asleep when they crept into my camp and kidnapped me. They bound my wrists and ankles and brought me here hanging from a pole carried by 2 of the little rascals. That was not an enjoyable experience, I can tell you. They are so short I kept bumping my head on the ground. Well, it only got worse, didn't it? They plonked me here in the middle of their blueberry bushes and said that unless I scared the birds away, they would eat me. Carnivores, that's what they are. Can you imagine those horrible little creatures with their knives and forks slicing me up? There's hardly any meat on me. Why would they bother? They'd be better off eating the bloomin' blueberries. But they don't. They grow blueberries just to make a special dye which they rub on the skin to turn it blue. I love eating blueberries myself. Oh, which reminds me, I'm starving. The old man begins cramming handful after handful of blueberries into his mouth. You follow his lead and gorge on the tasty berries until you can't eat any more. Add 2 stamina points. I keep getting given stamina that I don't need. Finally, he lets out a satisfied loud burp and asks where you are headed, and you reply that you are on your way to the Moonstone Hills, on a quest. He lets out a low whistle and says, "Well, a bit of advice for you then before I go. If you are thinking of sleeping out here on the plain, make sure you build a fire to keep away the hungry critters roaming around at night. And since you're going to be exploring caves, here is a lump of stickle wax in case you get bitten by a gronk. Just rub it on the bite and you'll be fine. Now I must be on my way to Deedle Water. My wife will be wondering what happened to me." He shakes your hand and wishes you luck. You watch him gather up some blueberries before heading off. Do you want to look inside the Blue Imp cabin, or would you rather carry on? So I've got some stickle wax, handy for gronk bites. Not a sentence I expected to be saying first when I woke up this morning. But yeah, we will go and have a look at the Blue Imp cabin. We've killed them. I think it's only fair that we also nick their stuff. You pick up a long knife that was lying on the ground and tuck it into your belt. With your sword in hand, you enter the cabin ready for any unexpected surprises. So we've got a spare weapon, that's handy. The cabin is very basic. There are 3 rickety wooden beds lined up against one wall, and a table with 3 chairs set against the opposite wall. Out to the far end of the cabin there is an iron cauldron, bubbling away on top of a log fire burning in the hearth. The blue liquid is obviously the dye the old man was talking about. There are some cooking utensils and small jars of dried herbs, spices and liquids on a shelf, but little else of interest. Do you want to look at the labels on the jars or leave and carry on? Let's look at the labels, why not? The glass jars are labelled dried delia petals, zanhoke seeds, noop powder, red thorn leaf, sif paste, lotus flower and fire root juice. You can fit 3 jars in your backpack. So, of those, I'm going to take the lotus flower, the fire root juice and the red thorn leaf, because they are the most sensibly named of the available items. Finding nothing else of interest, you leave the cabin to carry on to the Moonstone Hills. The rest of the afternoon passes off without incident, and you reach the base of the Moonstone Hills as the light begins to fade. You look around, very much aware that you need to find somewhere safe to spend the night. You can either sleep where you are in the long grass or build a bivouac out of the fallen branches. If I was to try and build a bivouac in real life, I would still be working on it when the next day dawned, but being an adventurer, I'm guessing I've actually got some vaguely useful bushcraft skills, so let's build a bivouac. Live out my fantasy at being faintly competent at a thing. It doesn't take long to gather enough branches to build a bivouac. You start by making a tripod using the 3 longest branches which you tie together at one end with a long strip of thin bark. You lean the remaining branches against the tripod until the bivouac is complete, leaving a small opening at the bottom to climb through. Happy with your shelter, you rummage through your backpack and find a few scraps of food to eat. Add 1 stamina point. Don't need it. And also, I've got 10 provisions. My backpack is full of hobnobs. It's a cool evening, but you should be warm enough under your blanket inside the bivouac. Do you want to build a campfire anyway, or would you rather go straight to sleep? I will build a campfire as the old man instructed me. And if you can't trust an old man in a fighting fantasy book, who can you trust? You use the spare branches to make a fine crackling fire before crawling inside your bivouac. You roll out your blankets and lie down at last to rest, enjoying the warmth of the flickering flames. A full moon rises into the night sky and you stare at the bright stars, thinking about the events of the day before drifting off to sleep. You have vivid dreams and are woken up a couple of times by creature noises, but the night passes without incident. You wake up early in the morning, gather up your belongings and begin your climb of Moonstone Hills, determined to reach Skull Crag by noon. The grass-covered foothills are easy enough to climb, but the going gets harder when the incline becomes steeper and you have to avoid loose rocks and stones. Each hilltop you reach, you look eastwards, hoping to catch sight of Skull Crag. Finally, you see what you are looking for in the distance. It's a hill which stands above all the others, and more importantly, it has a rounded top which resembles a human skull. Spurred on by the sighting, you scramble down the hill and press on. It is not long before you arrive at the entrance to a small cave in the foot of the next hill, which is still some distance away from Skull Crag. Do you want to look inside the cave, or would you rather keep heading east? Let's look inside the cave. You step warily into the gloomy cave and notice small footprints on the sandy floor. Without warning, a soul-chilling howl breaks the silence. From out of the shadows at the back of the cave steps a shriveled, hunched-over hag with long, thick grey hair and ragged clothes. The skin on her face is dry and wrinkled, and her eyes are sunken in their sockets and jet black in colour. Her thin, loose-skinned arms and scrawny hands with blackened nails are stretched out in front of her. When she opens her mouth to scream again, you see she has no teeth at all. The wretched creature is a plague witch, and you must fight her. There's a picture of the plague witch. Yeah, I don't like it. Yeah, it's another thing that kind of looks as though it wouldn't be out of place in the pages of the Beano somehow. I can see the artist is really good at what they do. This isn't me throwing shade at the artist for a perceived lack of skill. This is me simply feeling as though the illustrations have so far shown something of a tendency to undercut the fantasy. I think in a game book, you really want illustrations that allow you to kind of put yourself in the world, even if they are somewhat caricature-esque, even if they've got that exaggerated quality. I feel as though you want to feel as though you're looking at something that you could imagine as existing, whereas this is very, very flat, very two-dimensional, very much just a shadow almost. Again, very strong use of black shadows and a background that is just vague. I don't think it really does the job of helping me to imagine that I'm in this world. It's just basically going, you're reading a children's book and here is a children's book illustration to go along with that. Anyway, if you lose any attack rounds during combat with the Plague Witch, who has a skill of 5 and a stamina of 5, the Plague Witch will have touched your skin and infected you with worm plague, which will quickly turn your eyes black and make you go blind just like her. It will be impossible for you to continue your quest, and your adventure will be over. So, got to beat her without losing a single attack round with skill 5, stamina 5. I don't see that as being a particular problem. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the Plague Witch. I was not hit, which is good. Put her out of her misery, I would suggest. Onwards. A search of the cave yields nothing more than an old clay pot with a cracked lid. Do you want to look inside the pot? Go on then. You find 5 gold pieces and a locket of grey hair in the clay pot. You take the gold and you must decide if you want to take the locket of hair as well. Is the hair of a blind hag canonically lucky? I don't feel as though the hair of a blind hag with diseases is lucky. I think I will just take the gold. So I now have a whopping 5 gold pieces. Clambering up and down hills over boulders, rocks, stones and shale all morning is very tiring. Tiring and thirsty work. You slip over several times, hurting your arm in one particularly bad fall. Lose 1 stamina point. So first stamina loss of the adventure. Maybe I should eat a packet of hobnobs to make the pain go away. You push on, reaching a narrow gully between 2 steep hills through which a stream is gently running. Do you want to stop and fill your water flask, or rather keep walking east? I guess we'll fill the water flask. Don't want to be running out of water, what with one thing and another. As you bend down to fill your flask, you suddenly hear the sound of rocks tumbling down from above. You spin round to see a huge boulder rolling down the side of the steep hill towards you. You dive sideways to try and avoid being crushed. Roll 2 dice. Is it less than equal to your skill or not? Well, my skill is 12, so I'm always going to pass this test. No need to roll. The massive boulder thunders past you and crashes into the stream, causing a huge splash of water. You scramble behind cover and look up to see 2 sinewy men with long straggly hair and a beard standing on the top of the hill, shaking their fists. They are wearing animal skins, and they are both carrying a leather bag and quiver of arrows across their shoulders. The wild hillmen reach for their bows and fire 2 arrows down at you. Test your luck. I am lucky. Luck now 10. The arrows hit the boulder you are hiding behind, bouncing off harmlessly to land on the ground. The wild hillmen fire their remaining arrows at you, but they all miss. They shout down, shaking their fists angrily at you. One of them begins throwing rocks and anything to hand out of frustration, including his shoulder bag and bow, before walking off, cursing loudly. When you feel the coast is clear, you come out from behind cover and open the leather shoulder bag to find 1 gold piece, gold now 6, a small box of fishhooks and a small bag of salt. You take the items you want and also the bow and 6 arrows fired at you which are lying nearby. You fill your flask from the stream and take a long drink of cool water. Add 1 stamina point. Stamina now back to 18. The gully opens out onto a rock-strewn valley, at the end of which one hill stands out against all others. Its shape roughly resembles that of a giant human skull, almost as though somebody long ago had carved it that way. It is almost devoid of vegetation and has a rounded top. 2 recesses high up resemble eye sockets, and a large rock sticking out below could pass for a nose. There is an entrance to a cave at ground level which could easily be mistaken for an open mouth. You hurry along the valley as quickly as possible, looking at your map, eager to explore the inside of Skull Crag. You arrive at the cave and peer inside to see nothing but darkness beyond the sunlit entrance. Do you want to enter the cave or climb Skull Crag to find another way in? We were told to climb, so climb we will. You begin your climb of Skull Rock, scrambling up the bare rock face with ease. You reach a ledge 20 metres up and notice a stack of sun-bleached branches propped up against the rock face. You move the branches to one side and reveal a crack in the rock, which is less than a metre wide. The opening is just as described on Murgat Sher's map. You light your lantern and squeeze through the crack to find yourself in a narrow man-made tunnel, which has a low ceiling. The air is cool and still and has a slightly musty smell. You walk along the tunnel for some 50 metres before coming to a junction. Do you want to go left or right? Well, it's a straight left-right decision. I am nothing if not a slave to convention, so I will go left. You head down the narrow left-hand tunnel for 20 metres, the light from your lantern casting eerie shadows over the rough-hewn tunnel wall. Just been reminded that we were actually given directions by Murgat Sher's map, which are left, right, right again, so that's fine. You pass by a skeleton lying on the floor. One of its arms is pointed in the direction you are walking, the other is twisted up behind its back. Its upper torso is clad in chain mail armour. Do you want to try it on, or would you rather keep walking? Let's keep walking. I'm really anxious to get to the centre of this location as quickly as possible. You reach a section of the tunnel where the floor is littered with rocks and rubble. One of the rocks appears to move, and you realise it is not a rock but a grey-coloured creature. It is no bigger than a cannonball, and its plated exoskeleton looks to be almost as hard. You watch the creature uncurl and flip over onto 4 spindly crab-like legs. Its small head has large compound black eyes, long antennae and mouth parts with 3 rows of sharp mandibles which it uses to inject venom into its victims to paralyse them and feed off their blood. 2 more gronks flip over and scuttle towards you. So there's a picture of the gronk. I won't belabour the fact that I don't generally like the art in this book, and just say that it kind of looks like a Furious Globe artichoke. That's very much the vibe I'm getting from the illustration. The first gronk has a skill of 5, a stamina of 5, the second a skill of 5, a stamina of 4, and the third a skill of 5 and a stamina of 4. So I've got to try and win again without losing any attack rounds. Shouldn't be a problem. I'm going to roll some dice. I have killed all 3 gronks without losing any attack rounds. Flashing your sword swiftly through the air, you survive the battle unscathed. Add 1 luck point. Luck now 11. Everything is still at maximum. Breathing a sigh of relief, you carry on down the tunnel and soon arrive at another junction. Do you want to go left or right? Well, this time I believe we are going right. Ahead, you see the tunnel leads into a chamber which is lit by oil lamps. As you get nearer, you see there is a large iron cauldron suspended above a burning log fire by a chain attached to the ceiling. Its simmering contents make a dull, bubbling and plopping sound. A huge creature with a large round head lumbers into view, with a long wooden spoon in its hand. Dark green in colour, the creature has a bloated torso and stocky arms and legs. Its eyes and ears are small, but it has a wide mouth with a bulbous purple lips and long teeth protruding from its lower jaw, many of which are broken. It is wearing a filthy apron which is stained with blood and grime. The Norgal stops, sniffs the air and looks around before shuffling over to the cauldron. It dips the wooden spoon into the cauldron and scoops out a spoonful of thick green sludge with an eyeball sticking out. It puts the wooden spoon to its fat lips and noisily slurps down the sludge before sucking the eyeball into its mouth with a loud plop. "Delicious," it says in a deep rasping voice. "Eyeballs are so succulent. Mmm." You watch the creature bite down on the eyeball, its jaw slamming shut when the eyeball pops open inside its mouth, whereupon a wide smile of satisfaction spreads across its pockmarked face. To reach the tunnel beyond, you have no choice but to face the Norgal. Do you have a jar of sheep's eyeballs that you want to offer to the Norgal? I do not. So it's gonna be fisticuffs. There's a picture of the Norgal. Again, it's very vague. I think it's nicely framed, I will say that. You've got the cauldron taking up much of the bottom half of the picture, with essentially just rendered as a plain black shadow with flame coming out of it, with the Norgal sort of looming up above that, and it's very much shot from below to really emphasise the creature's size and height. So that is cool. I still don't like it. The Norgal is a powerful creature which fights with brute strength and savage aggression. Dropping the jar of eyeballs to the ground sends it into a rage, and it launches a frenzied attack on you with a flailing fist. It is now eager to feast on your eyes. Its thick hide is not easy to pierce, even with your sharp-edged weapon. The Norgal has a skill of 10 and a stamina of 9. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the Norgal. It reduced me to 12 stamina points, so I have taken the opportunity to eat one of the many packets of hobnobs I brought with me on this adventure, despite the text kind of assuming that I didn't, and return my stamina to 16. Provisions now 9. A search of the Norgal's lair reveals a string purse hidden in a small recess in the wall. You untie the purse and find that it contains 5 gold pieces. Add 1 luck point, where my luck is already maximum. Gold now 11. You place the purse in your backpack and walk over to the tunnel at the back of the Norgal's lair, and soon arrive at another junction. Do you want to go left or right? Well, we were told to go right again, so that's what we will do. Ahead, you see the tunnel opens up again, and you find yourself in an enormous underground limestone cave. Huge crystal stalactites hang from the high ceiling, which sparkle in the light from your lantern. Water drips down from the tips of the long and short stalactites into pools on the cave floor, echoing loudly. You are excited to think you might be standing in the crystal cave shown on Murgat Shaw's map. You notice that the ceiling to your right has a large round hole in it, as though something had bored its way through, and there is a patch of transparent goo on the floor directly underneath the hole. At the back of the cave there is a large shard of crystal lying on the cave floor, with an iron chest placed on it. Do you want to walk over to look inside the chest, or would you rather take a look at the hole in the ceiling? I'm here for the chest, and the chest alone. As you walk over to the chest, you see a large globule of green slime drip down from the hole in the ceiling on the floor with a dull plop, fizzing on contact with the water. A loud squelching sound comes from above, and you look up to see a large gelatinous blob appear in a hole in the ceiling. A huge, semi-transparent, gelatinous worm with pulsating innards which produce a luminescent green glow starts to slide down through the hole. It's a flesh-eating giant lava worm, a deadly creature and scourge of the cave trolls. The bloated jelly-like worm flops down onto the cave floor with a dull splat. It has powerful sonar senses for echolocation and slithers towards you, intent on dissolving you with its acidic mucus secretions and feeding on your liquid remains. You must fight it. Normal edged weapons have little effect on lava worms. Do you have any salt? I do indeed. There's a picture of the lava worm. I don't like it, but I'm going to use some salt on the worm. You rummage around inside your backpack and find the pouch and hurriedly pour the salt out onto the palm of your hand. You hurl it at the giant lava worm, bearing down on you, and watch it thrash about as it tries to shake off the granules. But the salt sticks to its slimy skin, and the worm's gelatinous flesh begins to melt like butter in a heated pan. Soon there is nothing left on the floor apart from its innards and entrails lying in a pool of green slime. Pretty good, pretty good. Poking through the innards of the lava worm with the tip of your sword, you find a copper necklace with a circular copper name tag with the initials MG etched on it lying in the pool of green slime. No doubt the initials of some poor soul who came to the caves in search of gold, but ended up as food for the lava worm. Do you want to wear the necklace or leave it where it is and inspect the iron chest? I want to inspect the iron chest. That is the reason I have come here. Although you're excited by the thought of having finally reached your goal, you approach the iron chest with caution. Much to your surprise, there is no lock on the chest. Sensing a trap, you lift the lid with the tip of your sword and cannot believe your eyes when you do so. Aside from a small wooden box inside the chest, it is empty. Someone has beaten you to it. You curse loudly and kick the chest in anger, which sends it spinning across the cave. The wooden box falls out and you pick it up to see that it is made of polished mahogany and has an ornately carved lid with a beetle motif in its centre. You shake the box and hear something rattle inside. Inspecting it closely, you see that the lid is tight-fitting. Do you want to open it? Sure, why not? It is impossible to open the box by hand. Do you want to hack it open with your sword? Yes, I do. You put the wooden box on the ground and swing your sword down hard on it, cleaving it in two. You notice a small lead ball roll out of the box at the same time as a cloud of green gas escapes from a glass vial that is shattered by your sword. The gas envelops you, making you choke. You run out of the cave and down the tunnel, gasping for air. but cannot escape the poisonous gas cloud. You drop to your knees, clutching your mouth, and fall unconscious. Your adventure is over. So that seems as good a point as any to pause the recording. Not entirely sure what I make of the Port of Peril thus far. I felt it started very slow. Much as I do like just prattling about in cities, I like to feel as though there is at least some kind of framing reason for me to be doing that, and the Port of Peril never really gave me a good reason as to why I didn't just hightail it out of Chalice as quickly as possible. There's some fun encounters in there though. I liked the little blue goblin things. They were great fun, and the lava worm is a great bit of business. So yeah, mixed bag really. Hopefully by the time I've played it through on my own time, my views will crystallise into something reasonably interesting. Sooner or later, there's just going to be a game book where I've got nothing to say. I will just get to a point where I'm like, oh, do you know what? This is just a game book. Yeah, it's fine. I feel certain, though, that I'll find something to talk about because I always do. So I'm going to go away, read the book on my own time. I'll be back for you in just a few moments with some closing remarks. Tatty bye. The Port of Peril is perhaps the quintessential curate's egg. There's a lot in there I like, and there's a lot in there I don't. Even the art, which I was very negative about in the recorded playthrough, isn't all bad by any means. There's a couple of really effective illustrations in the book, which make good use of the hazy washes to create a surprisingly forbidding atmosphere. In general, some of the monsters do look quite impressive. I think with an approach this stylised, it was always going to work better with things that don't exist in the real world. I certainly found the style less grating when it featured demons and the undead than when it was dealing with tavern keepers and shop assistants. Art is of course subjective, and I think there were probably some commercial considerations which may have led the editors to pursue a more contemporary look than the likes of Ross Nicholson and Martin McKenna. This won't be the last we see of Vlados Krizan's work, so I suppose I should do my best to get used to it. I think part of the impetus towards creating a new aesthetic is connected to a renewed focus on fighting fantasy as being books for children. This book is very much aimed at a younger readership than some of the previous books we've seen in the series, and I think that is a good thing. I think there's a recognition with the original series that the audience was growing up alongside the publication of the books, and that tended to be reflected in the increased complexity and darker themes that carried through into the likes of titles like Howl of the Werewolf, released long after the end of the first run of books. With Port of Peril, it seems like there's a sense that the same audience maybe now has children of their own, and perhaps they would like to share the books with a new generation. Although the Port of Peril has plenty aimed at long-term fans of the series, I think it works really well as a jumping-on point for fighting fantasy as a concept. I think it might be quite nice for a young person to play Port of Peril and then, assuming they enjoyed it, go back to the early classics and enjoy seeing the various characters and locations appear as they played through them. So I think it was the right call. There's plenty of game books out there catering to the weird audience of middle-aged men like me, and I think there's still a lot to be said for fighting fantasy as the best introduction to the concept of tabletop role-playing for younger readers, which was, after all, the idea behind Warlock of Firetop Mountain. I'm not sure I'd want an aspiring dungeon master to take a huge number of lessons from the book, particularly with regard to closing off bits of plot, but we'll get to that later. Overall, there is a lightness to the Port of Peril, which I thought was quite refreshing, and as always, Ian Livingstone is a naturally compelling writer, even if you argue that he's scarcely stretching himself with this book. One thing that's a welcome change from Blood of the Zombies, which we played last time, is the overall difficulty level, especially with regard to the combat. Whereas Blood of the Zombies was literally unbeatable as written, Port of Peril is pretty chill, certainly as far as combat encounters go. There's nothing in here that's going to give even a basic character much pause for thought, and there's an absolute embarrassment of ways to boost your skill further. Magic weapons and armour litter the world like dog poo in a public park. I was practically tripping over shields, helms, rings, magic potions and gauntlets that would boost my combat prowess. If you start with a lower skill, there is an opportunity to boost it to 12, that is on the main path, and I think by the time I faced down the final challenges, my effective skill was 25, which is both insane and a delightful change of pace. Of course, if you're playing according to the rules as strictly written, you can't boost your skill above your initial level unless instructed so by the text. This is a rule that exists almost entirely, so it can be ignored. There's a handful of books that remember to specify skill bonuses appropriately, but the majority of writers didn't bother. In some ways, having a skill of 7 and then having 13 additional skill points that the rules won't let you use is even funnier to me. But I think whenever you're playing books like this, you have to try and play in the way that makes the book the most fun, where the rules are perhaps not as clear as they might be. And it is just fun to build up your skill until it's in the mid-20s. That's just an enjoyable experience. So I completely ignored the rules as written and went down that road. There's plenty of additional luck points to be found throughout the adventure as well, which is handy because despite offering an olive branch on difficulty, Ian Livingstone remains as fond as ever of killing you if you fail a luck test at the wrong time. It's a basic design, but it does make luck properly impactful, so I never mind it too much. You're clearly not meant to have much access to healing, despite the rules as written giving you the standard 10 provisions. I feel as though if you're going to play so as to allow yourself the benefits of the skill bonuses, you should probably play without access to those 10 provisions, since that feels closest to the intended spirit of the game. I think there's a missed opportunity to combine the luck tests with the limited access to healing and slowly drain the player of stamina through failed luck tests, rather than simply killing them outright, but I'm splitting hairs, really, there. Since the fights are so straightforward, the deadly use of luck does provide a counterbalance and inserts a sense of jeopardy into things. The structure also contributes to the difficulty being less oppressive than some of his other work. It's a largely linear affair, a series of set pieces with optional encounters that branch off from the main narrative. It doesn't feel quite so tiresomely linear as some, thanks to the various encounters being usually a bit larger and a bit more detailed, although there are some places where the linearity really does become something of a problem. And I think this is the benefit of a more open set of locations. In Blood of the Zombies, I was very aware that I was going down a corridor and checking rooms, and there generally wasn't all that much going on in those rooms before I was then dumped back into the main corridor. In the Port of Peril, the side locations are physically larger, and being positioned in urban or wilderness settings gives them more scope to experiment, which is definitely a benefit and helps mitigate that sense that you are just being led by the nose. You start off in Chalice, head to the Moonstone Hills, then it's a visit to Darkwood Forest before Port Blacksand, and then back to Darkwood Forest for the final showdown with the big bad who, spoilers, turns out to be Zambar Bone out of City of Thieves, who it turns out is both the Renegade Master and also back once again with the ill behaviour. I found Chalice a bit underwhelming on the recorded playthrough, but actually really enjoyed it on a second visit when I was less irked by not having been given a good reason to just muck about. There's a lot of nice moments to be found in the city, and I was delighted that the barrel we ignored on the recorded playthrough turned out on closer inspection to be full of angry rats, much as I had surmised. Bit weird to be pleased to almost get my face bitten off by rats, but vindication is better than stamina. One element I did really like was starting off with a bunch of weird knickknacks and no money, and then trying to turn those items into more useful items via trading them and finding ways of picking up a few gold coins that would let me buy a few other bits and pieces along the way. Turns out it's a lot more enjoyable to go shopping in a game book when you feel like you've earned the money you're going to spend. It makes it feel much more like a reward and much less like the fantasy equivalent of grudgingly doing a big shop at Tesco's, even though it's the weekend and you wanted to watch the snooker. I'm always interested in how the smallest changes in how a thing is presented can influence how I feel about it, and this is a really good example of that. In particular, one thing that is absent is a really big list of items, and you just have to guess which of the bizarre things is going to turn out to be vital. That is not a thing that happens in this book, and given that it's something that Ian Livingstone has leaned on time and again, I'm very happy to see its absence here. So Chalice is pretty good, although I do think it suffers from a lack of clear direction. There is a selection of fun encounters here. I particularly liked trying to break into a posh person's house despite some bakers telling me it was a terrible idea. My biggest criticism, honestly, is that I'd just much rather this action took place in Port Blacksand, because the Port Blacksand portion of the adventure is briefer, and I think relocating the Chalice sections to Allansia's premier hive of scum and villainy would have made revisiting Port Blacksand feel just that bit more special. Overall, though, I've no complaints about Chalice. It's probably the section that feels the most open, and things do get rather more linear from here. We saw a good chunk of the Moonstone Hills in the recorded playthrough, and it's pretty good. There's a bunch of different weird places to distract you on the journey to Skull Crag, and once you get there, the mini-dungeon itself is perfectly enjoyable. You absolutely have to follow the directions on the back of the map, though. If you stray even for a moment from the path, then it's instant death. And I don't have a problem with that here. It's all part of the gimmick, and I think it's a great way to introduce a younger reader to the kinds of puzzle solving you might have to do in a game book or a tabletop role-playing game. One true path that is clearly signposted. That is absolutely fine when you've been honest and fair about it. Once you've defeated the dungeon, you then have to retrace your steps, remembering to make the opposite turns to the ones you made on the way in, which is also fun, especially if, like me, you occasionally forget which is left and which is right. There's also a clever bit of design whereby once you kill the lava worm, you find a necklace in its guts and you have the option to put it on, and it is cursed. But the text subtly hints that it might not be the most beneficial item by referencing the ill luck of the necklace's owner. And I like that. It makes sense within the story that someone with a proper magic necklace probably wouldn't have got dissolved by a lava worm. And that makes what is still something of an arbitrary trap feel just a lot more fair, because there is that foreshadowing. Speaking of traps, the trapped box that finished me off turns out to have a backstory, and I want to linger on that for a moment because it's one of my favourite ludicrous ideas from the book. It turns out that the box was put there by one Gernard Jaggle, a failed treasure hunter with a very heroic name, who has gone somewhat peculiar after many disastrous adventures in search of his fortune. And this takes the form of taking revenge on the world by littering adventure locations with booby-trap puzzle boxes. And I simply love this idea for a couple of reasons. One is simply that I find the idea of a man driven mad by failure taking an unnecessarily convoluted approach to revenge intrinsically appealing. It makes Jaggle feel like a Batman villain in the best possible way. But I also really like the idea of coming up with a bizarre rationale for all the demented traps that you would find in a typical dungeon. It acts as a way of framing those traps similar to Death Trap Dungeon, a means of providing a veneer of logic for things that have always been a slightly baffling feature of dungeon settings. It got me thinking it would be fun to expand on this idea and make it a more general feature of a fantasy world in a similar way to the concept of thieves' guilds and the like. I would potentially have some kind of insane secret society, perhaps a strange religious cult who, for somewhat obscure reasons, feels an overwhelming need to fill the world with various traps and snares, perhaps at the behest of their equally insane god. I just like those sort of post hoc rationales for fantasy gaming tropes. Once you get out of Skull Crag, I feel like things take a downward turn. You meet up with a ninja hunter called Hakkasan. She's an appealing enough character, but I did find myself chafing that palling around with her seems optional, but really isn't. If you try and ditch Hakkasan, it will inevitably lead to your demise. Initially, you join forces to hunt for treasure, but a chance encounter with a dying stonemason reveals the actual plot is the return of Zanbar Bone, and a quest to regain the Ring of Burning Snakes for the wizard Nicodemus in Port Blacksand. Zanbar Bone is trying to magically take over Yaztromo's tower in Darkwood Forest, and something must be done to stop him. Again, there's a fun few encounters in Darkwood Forest, but I did find it irritating that you are absolutely railroaded along the plot that Ian Livingstone has written. And I think this is the point where I go back to saying there are some problematic lessons that a young gamer might draw from this book in terms of then running their own games. One of them being that you come up with a plot, and then it is your responsibility as the dungeon master to ensure that the players under no circumstances deviate from that plot. That is not a good lesson to be drawing from this book. Partly this might be because I have an atavistic dislike of being told what to do, and I particularly dislike it when it seems like I have a choice but actually I don't. Any efforts to avoid the main plot here steer you firmly back on course, which is only really irritating when the text appears to be giving you the option to refuse. Railroading, when it's up front, feels a lot better than railroading that goes, "Oh, would you like to do this thing?" No. Tough. Every time you try to turn away from the path, something will happen to get you back on track, and I just find it maddening. I think this shows the weakness of only introducing the key plot point at a relatively late stage. Having been told I'm a somewhat feckless treasure hunter for half the book, I didn't feel like the text had really earned the right to force me into heroics. This is one book where giving you the save the world spiel early doors might well have been the better option. Indeed, starting you off in Darkwood Forest, sending you to Yaztromo to get the quest, then going to Port Blacksand, then back to Darkwood Forest, would have been a much better structure, I think. You do get to run into Gernard Jaggle himself, which is cool. You then give him a stern talking to about not dealing with his professional setbacks via the medium of murderous traps. It would have been better if he'd been full-on pantomime villain, preferably with a silly costume as well. As it is, the several people he has clearly killed with his traps get brushed under the rug because he promises to be good from now on. A bit like how in later seasons of Arrow, I got very frustrated with Oliver Queen, a character who has killed quite a few people with arrows, lecturing various other supporting characters on how you shouldn't kill people with arrows. And that's just because he decided that he wasn't going to kill people after he'd killed people. I think Darkwood Forest is the least successful portion of the story, and that's partly because I've always hated Yaztromo. He's a bit less of a selfish old man here, but his presence still rankles, and if it were left up to me, I'd have let him sort his own tower out. He actually provides some really useful things for your quest though, so at least he's properly helpful for once. You have to abandon Hakkasanzar here for a while, which is a shame on one level because she's really nicely written, but a relief on another level because, like all NPCs, she very much cramps your style. The last sections in Port Blacksand and beyond are quite good but somewhat underdeveloped. What's clear is that it remains the definitive Allansian city. As soon as you get inside, there's all manner of shady characters trying to stitch you up, and I love it. It illustrates that fantasy cities are at their best when they are pitched at a high level of ridiculousness. Otherwise, you're adventuring in fantasy Milton Keynes, and no one wants that. There's lots going on, but of course the plot has to propel you onwards towards the final confrontation. And that too is quite strong. There's a few necessary items, but given how linear the book is, they're very easy to find. There's two different ways to see off Zanbar Bone, which is generous by Ian Livingstone standards. And after I beat the book, I was happy enough to go back and do a bit of brief rummaging for the couple of items that I needed to unlock the better option for dealing with the big bad. Overall, Port of Peril is definitely a mixed bag. I definitely enjoyed returning to the classic fighting fantasy locations, but I think that both Darkwood Forest and Port Blacksand are honestly strong enough and diverse enough locations that they could have supported an entire book focusing on them. One of Ian Livingstone's biggest strengths as a writer is his ability to create a sense of place, but that takes time and space, and none of the locations here really get enough of either to fully leap off the page. I think you could have just gone back through Darkwood Forest and seen how it has changed since the days of Forest of Doom. That would have been a perfectly acceptable adventure. As always, there's no issue with his imagination though, and we are seeing a few tropes recycled from his previous work. His imagination remains strong. He's always had a good handle on a specifically British approach to fantasy world building. There is a provincial quality to Allansia that I've always enjoyed a great deal, and that definitely continues here. One thing that definitely isn't Ian Livingstone's forte in his later years is tightly written rules. On a functional level, this is more welcoming than many of his books, but it is dogged throughout by various small and not so small errors. We've already seen that the rules around skill gain make little sense if followed slavishly, and the mess with the provisions and the potion rules being included in the rules text but then treated as if they aren't there. There's several places early on where you get told to add stamina even though there's no way you can have lost any stamina. He deals with fighting more than one enemy by simply saying they can attack twice, which raises more questions than it answers, and there's a fair few places where the text as written doesn't quite match up perfectly if you take the option that you would prefer you didn't take to get through the scene. There's nothing in there that makes the game unplayable, but it would have been interesting to see how the rules worked in the app version of the book, which no longer seems to be available, or at least no longer easily available. Overall, I think the main reason I enjoyed Port of Peril is probably nostalgia. Artwork aside, it feels like one of the early books in the series, and that is always going to give me some warm feelings. I don't think it's especially strong beyond that. It's another one of those books that feels quite fun on an early playthrough, but becomes much more frustrating on subsequent visits as you start to realise just how restrictive the route through the story is. The story is muddled, but finishes strong, which counts for a lot. More than anything, it feels like a missed opportunity. There's so much in here that hints at something better, and I think the desire to cover so much ground accentuated some of Ian Livingstone's weaknesses as a designer. It's still nicely written though, and there's plenty of entertaining moments spread throughout the book, and I do like that it sticks so closely to the old school rules, something that had become a real rarity by the later stages of fighting fantasy. Cautiously recommended if you can find it for cheap, and a quick glance suggests it's easily obtainable for well under a tenner, which is nice. Just don't expect anything other than a very standard Ian Livingstone book, and you should be fine. That is all for this episode. I'll be back later this month with a listener suggestion, which is something I always look forward to for the bonus episodes. In the meantime, you can get in touch with me by email at hjdoomretrofun, or one word, @gmail.com, or by following me on Blue Sky. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, and I'll see you soon.